The one thing that we know it's going to be extremely successful at is enrolling a whole lot of people with health insurance who don't currently have it. Whether it's able to control expenses in the meantime is, well, something we question. But no question, up to 32 million additional people will have health insurance when this thing is fully phased in versus what existed prior to this law. They're going to do that by providing subsidies to people who earn up to 4 times the federal poverty level. Medicaid itself will be expanded. People will qualify who earn up to 1 1/3 times the poverty level, which is a pretty significant raise in the income level that qualifies you for Medicare, and it's thought that roughly 11 million of the newly insured people will be through Medicare or here, Medi-Cal. Small employer credits, you may be able to take advantage of those. If you have fewer than 50 employees, you may be eligible for credits for the portion that you pay of your employees' health insurance premiums. And the essential health benefits. This one gets at one of the things that inspires so much uncertainty within all of us about this law. Everybody, the health insurance that we have in 2014 will have to contain minimum essential coverage. But that hasn't been defined yet. We don't know what it is. And if it includes a lot of things, the minimum program is going to be fairly costly. If it's a fairly bare bones program, it could be fairly reasonable, but we don't know. So time will tell. We should prohibit limits on lifetime coverage. If you get sick, you shouldn't all of a sudden hit a benefit, a point at which you've received X number a dollar amount of benefits, and they say, we're cutting you loose, that's all you got, and you're still sick. That is no longer legal. Rescissions, you cannot change, you cannot cut back on the things that were provided. When you get a policy, if it says these things are covered, they're covered. The company can't come back and say, well, we said this was covered, but now it's not. You can't do anymore. However, it also banned what are called mini-meds, which are, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes because we've already had more than 1,300 exemptions from that rule. The big one that came right away was McDonald's. This went into effect, and McDonald's said, okay, well, we're going to cut loose nearly 1 million people on insurance. And the Department of Health and Human Services says, whoa, that's not what we wanted to happen. But all of these part-time, relatively low-wage people were receiving relatively modest health insurance coverage, catastrophic coverage essentially, at very low cost. And under the law, that kind of plan wasn't allowed. So basically, HHS has decided that rather than take away the insurance that people at McDonald's and many other employers have, they would allow them to continue to have that at least for the time being. So for now, it's just one of many unintended consequences of the law. They didn't think that all of a sudden millions of people were going to become uninsured as a result of their handiwork. The interesting one is this W-2 reporting. This only affects, beginning in 2013, large employers of 250 or more employees. But they will have to report on the employee's W-2 form the amount of health care benefits that the employer has provided. Now, if you think that lays the groundwork for taxing those benefits down the road, well, you're probably right about where the people who wrote the law are. The big year is coming up, and that's January 1, 2014. And at that time, the individual mandate kicks in, requiring that every citizen, with very, very few exceptions, has to have health insurance coverage, or they will be penalized to the tune initially of $695 a year. The penalties go up over time for not being insured, but we'll talk in just a couple of minutes about some of the incentives, some of how this may play out. Nobody knows right now how this is going to play out. First, in the Supreme Court, but next, how are young people who consider themselves invincible going to react when they're confronted with fairly steep health insurance bills, and we'll talk about why in just a second, and only a $695 pet penalty if they choose not to have insurance. We'll see. You have 50 or more employees, you don't offer. If any employee goes through the exchange, they're going to go to the exchange because they don't have any health insurance, and they can get a subsidy if they go to the exchange, right? So they go to the exchange. If one of your employees does that, then you have to pay $2,000 per employee for every employee over 30. So you subtract off 30, all the rest you pay $2,000 per employee on. Now this is another one of the places where the math gets kind of funny, because if you look at what this might end up costing, depending on what the benefit package is, a whole lot of people look at it and say, wait a minute, I'd get off really cheap if I just didn't pay health insurance for my employees and sent them all to the exchange and paid the penalty. That penalty isn't that high. So we don't know how that's going to play out yet, but that's certainly, there's going to be a lot of people putting pencils to paper, especially, say you're in this business, you've been providing health insurance to your employees for who knows how long, but your lead competitor all of a sudden says, I'm not doing it, and watches his costs drop like a stone, and you look at that, and he starts underbidding you on contracts. What are you going to do? How much will this cost me? Who the heck knows? And it begins with, what benefits are we talking about? Just to throw an incendiary match into things, did we really know that contraceptive and sterilization services were going to be required? Well, no, not until a couple of weeks ago, but we now know that's definitely going to be part of the program, even for religious organizations that are not in fact churches. Who knows? But that is in there largely because feminist groups and that lobbied for it and said, well, it has to be in there. And a lot of states, we have a whole lot of things that are state mandates, because there are a whole lot of things that are worthy, that probably ought to be covered, but should they be mandatory? And each state is different. You know, cancer treatment, yes. Mammographies, how often, so forth. It varies state by state. We don't know how much of this stuff is going to be in there, and so how much will it cost? Until that's been decided, we don't know. Employers can only use the exchange if they're up to 50 employees, and that happens right away. As it says there, states can allow, but don't have to allow, larger employers to use the exchanges, and they can't do it until 2017. So basically the exchanges are for individuals and for smaller employers. And they should provide, if they work well, a fairly easy comparison of all of the health insurance options that are available, and for individuals who qualify, and for that matter companies that do, that's where they'll get the subsidies to purchase insurance. It's through these exchanges. This is before the Supreme Court. They will issue an opinion this summer. We have no idea how that ruling will go. And one of the key things is the question right after it. One of the judges, the one who actually ruled on the 26 state suit, said that there was not severability. Severability is a cool word. It's basically when the court throws out one provision of a law, does the whole law get thrown out? And many federal laws are written with severability clauses in them, saying essentially that if one provision of this law is found to be unconstitutional, the rest of the law still stands. The writers of this bill explicitly left the severability clause out, which would seem to mean, now, well, it could mean a lot of things, but the judge, and I thought he was very wise, but then we agree with him. He said that the part that he found unconstitutional wasn't the whole law, it was the individual mandate. But he said he was not wise enough and did not want to presume to be wise enough to be able to say, okay, how does that affect the whole rest of this thing, which a lot of which is built on the idea that individuals will indeed buy health insurance. So if you throw that out, which he did, he found it unconstitutional, he said, well, then the whole thing has to go, because I can't pick and choose between the provisions that are legal and aren't legal when you take that out. That's what he did. He was the only judge who did that. But what the Supreme Court does, who knows? And for that matter, if indeed they do find, even if they find the individual mandate unconstitutional and don't touch the rest of it, what does that do for the system? And getting to your point back here with regard to how to, competition and insurance companies, the reason that insurance companies bought into this was the notion that there were going to be millions and millions of new insurance buyers who right now are getting health care. They go to the emergency room and it just gets absorbed into the premiums that we all pay for the insurance that we have. And so the companies thought, well, that's not going to happen anymore. Those folks are going to be paying premiums too. Well, if the individual mandate goes and they aren't, how does the rest of this work?